I was, talking about shoes and fitness level. And after RSA, I'd been to RSA, walked a ton of steps at RSA, and realized, hey, I got to get new shoes if I'm going to be walking around with stuff on my back all day. As opposed to, I had some comfortable like Vans basically type shoes, not quite Vans. And then for Black Hat, just didn't think about buying shoes ahead of time, and then wore the same shoes, which are comfortable normally. However, not going to do uh, the 15,000 steps a day with 20 pounds on your back. And so this is putting that post out there on LinkedIn is my mark in the sand, my line in the sand saying I'm going to get shoes so that I'm comfortable during these events as opposed to come walking. I had blisters at the end of the week.
Joining me today is Buu Lam, Community Evangelist for DevCentral, an F5 technical community. Now, today we're talking about not only community, personal branding, content, and F5. How about you join me in welcoming Buu to the show? Buu, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on. This is really exciting for me. I've watched your content for a while and was like, oh, I'd love to collaborate with you at some point. And so I'm super glad that you reached out.
So that was totally weird because when I reached out to you, you're like, oh my God, of course I want to do it. So I had imposter syndrome. I'm like, wait a second, I watch your stuff. And you're like, you watch my stuff. And it's so weird how that works out. We're a big fan of each other.
It's like that Spider-Man meme where the Spider-Man's pointing at each other, perhaps.
The three of them. Who is the real Spider-Man?
Yeah. Grab Eric for the third one.
Oh, speaking of that, I don't want to spoil it now, but by the time this comes out Wednesday, we're doing a live stream with Eric. I'm actually going to a studio. We're sitting down having a whole bunch. You got to check it out on the Disco Posse podcast. We are just going to have a blast. We're planning reInvent. So this is our test phases leading up to it.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I would love to hear how that goes.
You'll watch it either live or you'll have to watch a recording. But let's get to ours a little bit. Let's talk about first. I want to jump to BlackHat because we were talking about it just before kicking things off on the show. You had that last week, and now you're here on the podcast. So you're definitely drinking from the fire hose of getting back and forth. How was it?
It was really cool. It was amazing to see all those people getting together again, and especially like that week of Vegas is B-sides, Black Hat, and then DEF CON. And so you catch people at Black Hat, they're kind of in the middle of it. They haven't gone on to like day 6 or 7 or 8 in Vegas at that point. So you can still catch people while they're in a good mood, and they're not super well. Some of them are, you could see in the mornings they're a little bit tired, but it's not quite like DEF CON where they're probably well into a full week at Vegas, and that's never a good idea.
As much as people say like Vegas, oh, you're there, you're having a great time. I'll tell you what, and you and I live it firsthand. It's up early, to bed late, editing content, putting together stuff, getting ready. And then you're doing 2 or 3 recordings early morning to get it out on social. And it's just, it's complete chaos. It's fun. We enjoy it or else we wouldn't do it. But I mean, isn't that what your typical day looks like?
Yeah, it's a rush. And you know what? One of the things that so I worked in sales for a long time, for 10 years at F5, and then moved to this role to be more dedicated to creating this content. And one of the things that I always tell people when they ask me, do you miss sales? And one of the things I miss is good or bad, that end of quarter rush of trying to get some stuff done, and needing to, there's deadlines and there's revenue to bring in and within a certain amount of time. Your heart rate spikes at that time, and not quite the same, but Black Hat and doing these events is kind of like that. It's like, okay, we got the footage, let's hit editing, let's get it so that it's all polished and ready to go to get published. And so you do have that little bit of a rush of working through that. The consequences of not hitting publish at a certain amount of time at a certain point is a little bit different from missing a huge PO that you were promising to bring in for your sales manager. But at the same time, it's still super fun. It's fun to do all that. But yeah, it is a lot of work. It's a lot of hours, but I enjoy it. This is what I'm living for right now.
Are those deadlines self-imposed? Because I'll give you my answer after you tell me, because I really feel sometimes they are, but you want to make it on that specific time.
Yeah, it is definitely self-imposed. I think there's a certain amount of timeliness to this kind of content when you're covering events. And so you
Hmm.
want to get it out there when to be a part of that whole buzz and not kind of show up late to it. There's advantages to showing up late to it because you could put in more time perhaps and you can polish that content even further and make it even look more special. But it's also self-imposed. But I think for people who do self-impose that kind of stuff, that the goals and the timelines on themselves, I think part of that is just you want the best, you want to have the best content, you want it to be released with everything else, and so you hold yourself to a higher standard. And luckily the team that was with me, we all hold ourselves to that standard and we want the same thing. And so yeah, we impose it on ourselves, but luckily we were able to make it.
I think I do the same thing when I'm at a conference and I do a quick podcast recording, like an improv one. As soon as I'm done, I'll go sit down at a table and I'll start editing and cut it up and get it right out and start uploading. And I'll walk around with either like my laptop in hand while it's uploading so I can publish it immediately. I agree with you. There's a certain, you want to get part of that buzz that's going around. So you want to drop that content right away while the buzz is happening, because afterwards you might not get the same views, reaction, and information out there to the audience. What were you guys doing at Black Hat? What was your whole goal?
Yeah, we were having chats. So, one of the things that I think about when doing these events is I kind of want to honor the people that put on the event. So, we have our event staff, our event organization team, who actually does all the coordination of the event and puts it on and figures out how it's logistically going to work. And they put a ton of work into it. I've seen it firsthand at this point, and so I want to honor them first and foremost. We're making a presence there. I want to honor the company itself. F5 puts in a lot of dollars to be able to show up to these events and to be able to interact with folks. So I want to make sure honoring that. And then I want to honor everybody else that's involved. So the people that are working in our booth and they're out there and they're interacting with customers. And I want to make sure, hey, whatever they're doing there, I want to show that to the entire world. And then I want to also talk to organizations that are affiliated with F5 and some that aren't affiliated with F5 as well, getting their message out there because a lot of them have joint solutions with F5 and Black Hat and these events are a time to show off that kind of stuff. And then I also, the underlying story of that entire set of things that I'm trying to honor is just Black Hat itself. Like, what are we there for? What are we talking about? What are the conversations that are happening? And I use the word conversations because this is a time where, hey, you can consume content, but these conferences are actual opportunities where people converse and have conversations. So I just want to take that because that's the unique part of it, those conversations, and then take that and share that with everybody else.
I think more happens when you're in person at a conference, the conversations, the actionable items that follow. An example, going to any of the summits or events that happen around the world, you could try to do as much as you can virtually, but you can run into 10 people at a conference and get 10 things accomplished and more
Mhm.
progression than you can virtually. And I think that's what I value, is not only talking to the folks there, but networking on a couple of things. I'm going to switch gears and talk about your personal branding, because I want to talk, how did you get into podcasting? How did you get into being an evangelist?
Yeah, that is so. If I back up a little bit, I mentioned that I was in sales for 10 years. I was a solutions engineer based in Vancouver, British Columbia, covering British Columbia customers and a couple other parts of Canada as well. And, back in 2020, everything's going fine. And then all of a sudden, everybody's sent home. And one of the things that I cherished in my time as a solutions engineer was I got to organize the F5 users group in Vancouver. And I love that because that was a time where, hey, everybody's here is a fan of F5. They're already customers. I don't have to sell you anything anymore. We can actually just gather as a group and just talk about how cool F5 is, which is a subject I love to talk about. And we can talk about the cool things that my customers are doing with their F5s, and I can give them more knowledge. And it's a really cool and safe setting. And I love that. However, all of a sudden was it March 2020 hits and then everybody sent home, and I had a user group that was booked for, I believe it was June, And all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're already in the planning phase, the venue is booked, and all of a sudden we figured out that we had to pull the plug on it. Now what are we going to do? Everybody's at home. Um, and we're not going to be able to communicate with the people that I really enjoy communicating with. And so first things first, people started spinning up these virtual happy hours. And
Yep.
so I was like, me as a person, maybe I can start up one of those and have a chat with folks. And I actually did that with a colleague of mine, Peter Scheffler, and the two of us started this virtual happy hour. And yeah, there was some alcohol consumed on there, but that was totally optional. You didn't have to do that. But it was a
That was
way
in
for
your own
everybody to
home
connect.
anyway, so it worked out.
Absolutely, yeah. It's not stuff that's hiding back here.
I don't
Um,
see anything.
yeah, and that was a lot of fun. It allowed everybody to connect, and we kind of took that, and that was just of service. There was nothing that I wanted back from that. That was just, hey, I just want to connect with folks. Everybody's feeling a little bit lonely right now. We can't go talk to each other, so let's do that. At the same time, in a parallel track, is what are we going to do with this user group? And so it really just evolved. I had this happy hour that I actually called Booze Hour. Peter and I decided that that was a pretty good name for it. And then when it came to the user group, it was like, okay, well, you know what? I'm already doing all this video stuff. I'm on these happy hours all the time. I don't expect people to turn their video on during those happy hours. And so it could have been just me just on video, but oftentimes we had upwards of 50 people that were joining them,
Oh,
just
nice.
all chatting about. And then took that idea and then just turned it into more video content, but just more geared towards the things that we would talk about at our user group. And we did that weekly for a year. And so we would stream. We would have one live stream that was just chatting, more casual type stuff, things that we would banter over a coffee or over a beer. And then we also had more of a technical focused one that I would run as well, and just bring people tips and tricks and some of the experts that we would bring into town on behalf of F5. We would bring these experts from our broader team into town to talk about certain subjects. Hey, I could bring those people to you and have those conversations. We'll just do them over video. So I did that over time. And as I was creating all that stuff, just kind of putting some branding around it so that people would have a regular expectation of, here's the Monday thing that's going to come up. Here's the Wednesday thing that's coming up. They look like this. They have a different look and feel. And I happen to be the host of it. It's not all about me though. I'm just there to get people introduced to the folks and that they need and the information that they need. But I just happen to be the face of it. And then kind of in that journey, the DevCentral team, which is F5's broader community, not just the local user group, they were also doing live streams. And then serendipity happens. They had a headcount open. It was like, oh, you do this and you do this. Why don't you just do this stuff on that team? And it made sense for me to pop over there and end my 10 years as a sales engineer, which was the funnest time of my life, but it was a good time to do something different.
Now for a quick interruption. A huge shout out to our friends at Veeam for sponsoring this episode. Veeam Backup for AWS can easily protect all of your Amazon EC2, RDS, and VPC data. Wait a second. They can protect my VPC data too? Yep, that's right. Simplify AWS backup and recovery while ensuring security and compliance. All right, now back to our episode. A sales engineer turned evangelist. Somehow that's a nice fit because you bring in you bring on all that knowledge that you have of the product and how to use it and how to fix things for customers and really kind of bring out the best of them. Part of the stuff that happened during the pandemic is most of, you were kind of thinking, oh man, this sucks. The good came out of it. You came into this role. It's like a calling to you, because I would have never thought you were in sales, by the way. You don't come across as a salesperson. You come out as somebody who wants to share their knowledge and out there and really build that community.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is people think that moving into a sales engineering role, we would call it solutions engineering at F5. Moving into that role, they think, oh, I don't want to be in sales. And I've spoken to a few people in trying to get them to look at opportunities with F5. And they're like, I don't want to be in sales. And I'm like, I never really felt like I was in sales. To be honest, and I'm not going to share this with a lot of people, I didn't know how much any of the stuff cost. I was just on there on whiteboards drawing out the thing. Hey, if you want to solve that problem that you're talking about, here's some things. Maybe it's not all of the F5 stuff, but here's some things that you can use from F5 if you want to solve that problem, and then kind of hand it over to the account manager. The account manager knows how much all that stuff costs, and he can put together a bill of materials. And that freed me to just talk about technology and talk about how it would help people. And then the most rewarding thing was, a couple months later, and I go speak with the customer and follow up with them, and they're like, that solved the problem and we can move on. The business has moved forward and we're able to do X amount of things more efficiently now, or I have all these things that I can do now, or really that customer turned into the hero at their company. And that's super rewarding. And so as a technologist, if you're working in a company, you're probably already doing that already, helping out your coworkers and making sure that they're successful along with yourself, making sure that your entire department is successful. And really, my role as a solutions engineer was just making other people successful. It happened to be using F5 products, but I'd also have conversations where it's just about industry stuff in general. And maybe there's some things that I've brought from conversations that I've had with other customers that I can share with them that might give them insight on things that they can do next to solve problems. But yeah, and it just never really felt like sales. It was just felt like talking about stuff that I was passionate about.
Did you ever think you would be doing this? Like, did the pandemic ultimately, bring this out of you? It was a turn that you never thought you'd be doing, or would you always be as a sales engineer?
I never thought I would be doing this whatsoever. And so my quote, I told my kids 2 years ago before I ever moved to this role, I told them, because kids these days, they look at YouTube and they're, I think there's like a stat or something where you ask a kid what they want to be when they grow up and they say YouTuber. And I told my kids, clearly remember telling my kids, give up on that. Go get some real skills out there, because you're not going to be a YouTuber. That's not a real job. Lo and behold, about a year after that, I'm eating crow, and I am actually on YouTube and making videos for a living now. And that's how I put food on the table for my kids.
Dude, virtual high five right here, man, because let me tell you, 2 years ago, pandemic hit, we're sitting there, my kids are on YouTube, and I say, hit pause. How many views on this and how many subscribers? I'm like, you'll never find me on YouTube. I have eaten my own crow just the same. That's why I'm laughing. That is my same exact story. I have like 200 plus videos already on there, and I don't have any plans of stopping. So my word of advice to those who say never, never say never for that. Now, I'm not saying you can't make money on it or don't do it just for money, because you and I, we do it for our passion, though you do get paid to put yours on YouTube. But hey, that's another story. But never say never. I'm right there with you.
My entire career, I think, has been stuff that I never thought I'd be doing. Like I went to school. I took the Cisco networking academy at that time in the late 90s. And I took it because it was interesting to me, but I didn't think that would be my career. I actually went into sciences out of school, and then I dropped out of that and did some other stuff, and then went back to school and took technology stuff. So I got a job in technology, but I thought, hey, I'm never going to move out of the small town I was in. I'm just going to go get this schooling done, and I'm going to come back to my small town, and I'm going to start my career there. Well, I eat crow there, because I actually ended up moving out to Vancouver because I couldn't find a job in my small town doing technology stuff. And then I'm working in that job, and I see all these people that are consulting for us, and they're super smart, and they're helping us out with these things and challenges that I never thought I'd be able to solve on my own. And then lo and behold, I get laid off because, well, I didn't get laid off technically, but our company got bought out. And so I was out of a job, or knew my job was going to be done soon. Ended up working for a consulting company and doing consulting, and consulting for people that I had actually worked with before as well. And then I'm doing that, and I'm like, well, this is fine, but I'll never be able to get into sales. That looks like a really cool role, but it's probably not something that I can do. Lo and behold, I ended up doing that, and somehow finding my way into that. And so, yeah, a whole lot of serendipity through my entire career. Maybe I shouldn't resist it anymore and just go with the flow.
Can you tell me the next thing that you say you won't be doing so I can write it down and place a bet that you will be doing it?
Yeah, I got to think of something really good. Like I'll never be a billionaire. That'll never happen. Put some
Yeah,
of those
I'll
vibes
never
out
be a
there.
billionaire at YouTube. Maybe
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your setup just a little bit because I want to get to the community building and the content. So, and I'm sure the content is going to be talking about the setup. Right now, you're at home. By the way, we had a discussion about this. You have a nice plant in the background. How'd you come about that plant, man?
Yeah, this plant, this is a gift or a throwaway, however you want to look at it, from my wife. And so this plant was actually out on our back patio, and it was beside our barbecue. And anytime it would get windy, it would get blown over. So this plant has been beaten up quite a bit. Anyways, I was looking for a plant for my office to put in the background for something interesting and something different. And I'm looking around at fake plants, and they're actually pretty expensive. Like way cheaper if you just go out and buy some seeds and try to grow that plant yourself. However, who knows how that will turn out. And so I was eyeing up this plant in the backyard, and then one day my wife's like, I need to get rid of this plant. I'm like, I'll take it. And then, so that's how that plant ends up here. I don't know where that plant came from. That just showed up in my office one day, and oh, you can't quite see it,
I
but
can
there's
see it.
another little
Yeah, in the
shrub
back
there.
corner.
Yeah, little shrub there. This is also fake, just in case anybody's wondering.
I was
This
actually
is
gonna.
this.
I'm like, wow, you clipped that pretty good, man. That looks nice.
Yeah, no, that's a fake one, as is that one. But yeah, I have a couple plants now. Hopefully it makes the scene a little bit more interesting.
I'm not sure. One day, I'm not sure I want to put a plant in mine just because of I'm symmetrical. One would have to be on either side.
Mm,
I'd have to have two plants to even. Yeah, we won't get into the OCD tendencies I have.
yeah.
What kind of mic you got?
So this is the classic Shure SM7B that everybody knows and love. You know, one day I just went on and Googled, because I used to listen to the Joe Rogan podcast a lot more. I started listening to podcasts a long time ago, and that was one of the ones that I was into. And I just Googled, what does Joe Rogan have? And then I was like, oh, I'll just grab that, and maybe it'll sound similar to him.
I have the Rode NT USB mic, and it's great for traveling. I thought about the Shure, but then I'd have to change some things. I'll travel with it. So I'm hoping the sound quality comes as well as yours because everybody likes the Shure, but I'll say it has a nice little tripod to travel with, but we'll go there. What kind of camera are you running?
Yeah. So I have an A6600, Sony A6600, and I have a Sigma 16 millimeter 1.4 aperture lens on there.
Okay, man, you are like one up of me on those. I've got the Rode. I have a Sony 6400 that I'm running. So you got the 60. All right. All right. Can't complain. What's your setup look like? What are we looking at that's on there? How many monitors? You got a teleprompter? What's going on?
Yeah, so I am a one monitor guy. I used to have dual 24s or whatever, but you know what? I don't know about you, but I just find that when I have two monitors, I'm just always focusing on one, and the other one I'm using like 20% of the time. I'm not using it enough to have two. But then I got one ultra wide, and I actually use the entire monitor now. And so and I think it's actually less screen area, like physical screen area, than the 224s that I have, but I actually use the entire thing. So I'm a big fan of one single ultra wide monitor. I'm looking into a teleprompter. So I have a Glide Gear teleprompter, and I have like I think it's an 11 or a 10 or 13-inch field monitor attached to it. And I think it's oversized for what it was supposed to handle, but it does fit on there. Luckily, I kind of looked at the specs and kind of eyeballed it and said, if it doesn't work, I'll just duct tape it in, because I really want a big teleprompter. I used to have a 5.5-inch teleprompter, and it was really hard to deal with.
Oh man, that's like squinting there. How's it going?
Oh yeah, you could not read anything. So this is absolutely wonderful for me at this point. I've taken a picture of it, so I'll send you the picture of this setup afterwards as well. But I love this setup at this point. But for people, if people are looking at gearing up and they're just starting out, you start off with that 5.5-inch. It gets the job done. It was just reading text on there. That wasn't for me. But there's workarounds for that. Just have a second monitor right beside if you need to to read text. And then beyond that, I have a 48-inch big dome light with a Godox 60-watt video light on there. That's like just the one main light. And then I just have a couple of these. There's a little LED panel down there to fill in the lighting.
It's a nice setup. I think we might have the same color wall, maybe. It definitely brings it out. Yours might be, I don't know if yours is a little darker. I got too much lighting. I'm not sure, but you got a nice setup,
gray.
man.
Yeah, it's actually a gray wall, so that one of my colleagues told me that the reason why it's called a movie theater is called the silver screen is that the screen itself is meant to be silver because that absorbs the most amount of RGB.
Yep.
And so if you are a fan of using colored lights in your office and you want to color your wall, it's really effective if you just make it silver, and then you can shine whatever LED light or whatever RGB light on there, and it'll absorb that a lot easier.
I was going to paint my wall white. By the way, I knew nothing about, white balance at the time, bucket in hand, about to paint it. I was talking to a colleague of mine. He's like, no, you got to paint it dark. Here's for the lighting. And he's telling me and he explained to me, I'm go, oh, okay. Well, I'm so glad I didn't paint it that day white and it turned out the way it is, or else I'd be repainting around it. Yeah, it would be a total thing. But it's definitely a learning process when it comes to equipment. I must be on my third or fourth iteration of changing things around. And I took a cue from you, by the way. I pulled out my teleprompter. Yes, I have a Glide, and that's what I'm directly looking at with two monitors on the side. I had the 49-inch curve, single one, but I went with separate ones because my camera was above, and I was looking like I was looking up or right into the monitor, and it wasn't a direct view to my audience.
Yeah. So what I do, well, not really what I do for that, but I have two setups basically. I have a standing desk, and the position that it's in now is this position here. But when I'm sitting normally and doing work, it's actually at the height that's more optimal for the monitor. And if I was on a Zoom call, and people who are on Zoom calls with me normally, like day to day, they'll see that I'm actually looking up the entire time. So right now I'm in my podcasting position.
Your recording position. Speaking of recording, walk us through how you're creating content, whether it was at BlackHat or you create content for DevCentral. What does your process look like? The thought process, the idea, and through the whole creation.
Ooh, yeah. So that's a good question. First of all, the thought process really starts with the audience. Like, what am I wanting the audience to see, or what does the audience want to see? That's super important. I think that's the pitfall of so many people right now, is they put out the stuff that they purely want to see, and they kind of forget what the audience is actually going to want to see. Yep. And it seems obvious, seems totally obvious when you say that, but it's not. Like, people will put out stuff that they think, oh, because I like this, everybody else is going to like this, and I'm going to do this in a certain way and present this in a certain way. But that's not what people actually wanted to see. Like, I'm not picking on any particular person, but sometimes there will be stuff out there where people have created these elaborate intros, or they've spent a whole bunch of time just talking about themselves before they get to the point of what's inside of the video. They'll put on a whole bunch of music on there that is music that just they like, and they put it up a little bit too loud because they're really digging that song when they're looking for music. Things like that, not really thinking about how does that come out to the customer. That kind of goes back to when I was in sales and when I was talking to people. I know I'm there to talk about F5, but that's what I want to talk about. That's not what the customer wants to talk about. The customer is there because they have an issue. They showed up to this meeting because, one, they want to hear from us, but number two, in the back of their mind, they have some problem, and they might not be thinking of it during that meeting. That's my job to talk through it and figure out what issues they're dealing with day to day. But they have a problem that they need to solve. And so when I think about the videos, I'm like, it doesn't matter that, hey, we have this new fancy widget that came out. How does that relate to my customer and the content that I'm going to create for them? So that's number one, is coming up with what is the content, and how does the viewer want to see it, and what is it going to solve for them? Why would they want to watch this? And then kind of going from there We have a couple different types of videos that we're creating these days. We have these event coverage ones, which are set up to just, shoot some sort of conversation with somebody. And we're really trying to get at, depending on what it is, it might just be, we interviewed a lot of people at the F5 booth, and they had a lot of conversations with folks inside of the booth. They had conversations with customers, and I just wanted to bring out those conversations to everybody else and broadcast them without giving away any sort of secret stuff that might have been shared just solely in between those two individuals. But we wanted to bring out that kind of content. That was really easy to shoot. Just run up and hold a mic in front of somebody and grab that content. We grabbed some content that was with our partners, so that kind of content was more discussion style. We want to get out from them, what are the value? What's the value that you're gonna be able to deliver when we go to market with a partner like this, and we have a customer using our joint solutions. So we talk through that and talk through the benefits of them, because if they're watching from the F5 channel, they might know a little bit about F5 at that point. So let's focus more on our partners and what they bring to the table. And hopefully it's a scenario where 1 + 1 = 3. So we go through that. We have our Lightboard videos as well. And we're just getting back to those. Those are filmed in the locations where we have Lightboards. So we have them in a couple of our offices, and a couple of the guys actually have them in their office. That's built out if they have the space for it. And then we have content where we can actually just write using a tablet and just do overlay writing on top as well. So that's a possibility. So, I mean, between all that, did you want to talk about like the tools I use, I guess? Or?
Yeah, I would. So I use DaVinci Resolve, but what do you use to get this done, and how do you share it with the rest? Now, I don't do a collaboration with anybody else, but I know there's some tools out there that allows you to work as a team remotely and to share, whether you have to upload it, download it, or it's a cloud thing. So what kind of tools do you use to edit to make the process simplified in order to get these out in an expedited fashion?
Yeah, good old SneakerNet. So we did the memory card exchange at the end of the day, and then copied off each other. I got to say, BlackHat was the first event where there was 2 of us that were shooting video at the same time, and so we haven't actually encountered that before. A lot of it before, it was just shoot the video and edit the video off of one person would do that. And so this was the first one where we did that. There's Frame.io that I was just having a conversation with somebody else earlier today on the advantages of using Frame.io to kind of centralize where everything is. But yeah, we were just using SneakerNet for BlackHat in particular. I'm an Adobe Premiere user though. Love it or hate it. I am really close to trying to learn DaVinci Resolve at this point. There's a couple things that have irked me about using Adobe Premiere, but I think I've solved that by at least cranking up my autosave interval, so it saves every 2 minutes, good or bad. It's just going to save for me.
Oh, did you run into an issue where you didn't save?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the save interval by default, I think, is 15 minutes, and so
what?
15 minutes is a lot can happen in 15 minutes.
Oh my God, that would stress me out. I think mine's auto saved after just like a minute or two, and you hit the close button and it's ready to go. It's already auto saving it, but I'm just not trying to point you towards DaVinci Resolve. I mean, you could always get one of these nice little speed editors too for DaVinci Resolve.
I would love that. Yeah, that would be super nice to have. There's advantages to DaVinci Resolve in that we do a lot of, like everybody else that needs to edit videos at F5 is also on, advantages to Adobe Premiere. There's a lot of other people at F5 that are on Adobe Premiere. We have licensing for it and everything like that. So there's that. It's
actually not bad. It's not bad. I've used it. I've played around with it. Having a monthly fee though for an individual like maybe just wasn't, up to par where DaVinci Resolve has a one-time fee associated with it. Adobe Premiere, I did like the masking capabilities and then the tracking of it, but I've learned that DaVinci Resolve has the same thing. It's just different terminology. I think each person's tools may be different, but the outcome is what they're expecting or looking forward to. And if they're missing something, they're kind of doing without, and they're okay with it.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if you can just get the message across, I know between Resolve, Premiere, Final Cut, everybody is able to make fantastic
Yep.
videos out of them. It's just spending the time. I invested the time into Adobe Premiere so far, and so I'm going to hold on to it for a little while longer. I think once, I'm on an Intel MacBook Pro right now. I think once I
Yeah.
get on to the M1, M2 style stuff, I think that will also alleviate a lot of headaches for me as well.
Yeah. It's definitely a cool tool to kind of get into, but I really enjoy it. Not only using the product, but how quick you do. But I just learned mine over the holiday break. So, Boo, talking about the content you're creating, how much of it is storytelling? From podcast to demos to hands-on, or even the groups, how much does storytelling play a role in this?
Oh, it's everything. It is, and that was my entire time at sales as well, is that I could walk up in front of a customer and I had the slide deck that was like 130 slides long. I didn't show it to everybody, but if people wanted to, we could just sit there and read off the stats and the data and stuff
Wait,
like
wait, wait,
that. But
wait.
that's,
Did you ever get through an entire slide deck in a call?
yeah, there was times that I would at the beginning when I was really reliant on slide decks. I'll admit
Uh,
that for sure. Towards the end, the slide deck was just there for imagery, or to say, hey, we're talking about this subject. Here's a picture of the thing that I'm talking about right now. There's no text on there. I just have a picture for you because you expect to see something on the presentation board right now. But yeah, a lot of that was just to help guide a conversation along or help move a conversation along. Really, when I spoke to customers, it was really trying to talk about what is the impact here? What is this going to get you? Again, the customer is the hero. At the end of the day, I want my customer to be the hero. And so how do we get you to that point? So let me tell you about the products that and what can happen, and then ultimately you become the hero. And so when it comes to content, I think of it in the same way, in that, yeah, we can jump on, we can talk about speeds and fees, but really we need to talk about taking you through, hey, the outcomes here that are going to happen, and the customer who is the hero. Let's talk about and let's weave a story around how that actually happens, what are the pitfalls that are going to happen, and then how do you overcome those challenges to become the hero.
I think so. The whole part of a podcast or a demo or a sales thing is a storytelling aspect and living the story, having the actual, not taking somebody else's story and making it your own, but you've experienced it. Now you can also make a story, hey, the beginning, middle, and end in a whole like one sentence, or you can make it a compelling story that sits there and resonates with your audience, that they go, wow, I really dig that story, and they start to feel it emotionally, and that's where they're going to get attached to you as a person and the product and helping them through it. So, what do you have a story you can tell us? What's your best story that you tell?
Oh, wow.
I
What?
know I put you on the spot for this one.
Let me think. One of the stories that, oh, that one is a, I'm trying to think of how to modify this story so don't incriminate anybody. But the story is somebody who, let me try to abbreviate it here, because if this person were to hear it, they'd know exactly who it was, and several other people would know exactly who it was as well. But it was somebody who did not have backups done properly on their F5. And there's a bunch of different, and I don't blame them, because there's a bunch of different ways to do backups on your F5 big IP, and they happen to have the type of backup that they normally do fail. But there was more appropriate ways that they could have done backups as well. And so that person encountered a situation where, and if people are experienced with F5s, they know that F5, similar to a firewall, a lot of traffic, if not all of your traffic, goes through this thing, and so, or set of F5s. And so the F5s went down, did not recover with their configuration due to another issue that they were encountering that they didn't see. And so monitoring and backups were an issue there. And so I ended up going there. I'm editing this part a little bit as well. I ended up going there and sitting with the customer for many hours as they rebuilt their configuration. And ultimately they got to the end. They rebuilt it. They got everything up and running. And then a couple weeks later, we went in for a little bit of a postmortem, and we talked through it. And they identified, they owned up, and they're like, we didn't monitor the things properly. We didn't back up the things properly. Tell us how to figure it out, or tell us what the solution is. And so I drew out, again, get on the whiteboard. I draw out the things that they needed to do. And then they said, okay, let's just buy all of that at that point. And so, I mean, that's a story for me in going through a sale, but that's a story for them in that, yes, we got to the end. There was some issues that happened along the way, but they got to their resolution in the end.
But I am feeling that so I grew up as a traditional server admin. Backups were part of the process of doing it, and validating your backups and making sure that they work, or going through a proper test phase, was always key. But how often did you do that? There were some times I ran into the same issue, and you never want to. You don't want it to be an afterthought. And I actually, just from that short story that you do, all I'm thinking about is, crap, I've been through that same scenario. Boo, let's talk a little bit about community building. And I know we touched on it in the beginning, but what are you building? I mean, what is your entire role for DevCentral in building this community?
Yeah, so the DevCentral community has been around for a long time at this point. I think it's coming up on 8. I could be wrong here. I think it might be 15 years. Hold on.
Wow.
I'm not gonna do them justice at this point. I think it's 18 years that they're coming up on.
There's a disclaimer on this that we're an approximation of time on how long it's been around. Yes. He's on the spot. No, I'm just kidding.
Depends on when you're watching or when you're listening or watching this, right? It could be. It's been around for a long time. It's been around for a long time, to the point where this'll date it, is that DevCentral, F5's technical user community, was actually originally the place where they put in information for their API. Now, we talk about APIs now, and we talk about APIs in the sense of REST APIs or gRPC. This predated SOAP. So the API was actually something else, and then it migrated to SOAP. And then, so this is the age of the DevCentral technical user community. But it was created back then because we didn't have like Discord or Reddit or GitHub at the time to collaborate on code. And so they created DevCentral, and they were able to bring the community on there for iControl and iRules. iControl is the API for Big IP, the Big IP appliances. And then iRules is the data plane scripting language that we have for F5. And so people could collaborate on their solutions on there. They could share stuff, but with both of those things, it's not like F5 creates the tool, but we can't tell people use the tool in this way. It's a programming language at that point. So just do whatever you want with it. If you break your F5, undo the thing that you built and put it back to the point where we created, or to the state that we created it in, and then hopefully everything's fine. And so people needed a place to collaborate on there. And then obviously it's really easy for, once you're in there, to talk about that. You could talk about everything F5 at that point. So we have tens of thousands of users on the DevCentral user community because of that. And we have this long history on there, and we've always had evangelists on there. So one of my teammates, Jason Rom, has been with F5, I think, for 13 years at this point, always been on the DevCentral team. He was actually, DevCentral ran a iRules contest that was like, hey, solve this challenge using an iRule. Whoever has like the most primo code is going to win some sort of award. They were actually giving away pretty nice awards at that point as well, not just a shirt or anything. He won it. And he beat out some heavy hitters on that as well back in the day, other people that have since come to F5. But not too long following that, Jason ended up joining the DevCentral community. So he's been on there for a long time. We've had a couple other people kind of come and go. Peter Silva has been on there for a while now at this point as well. But he's always kind of broadly been an evangelist for F5 with what he's doing, and never, in the early days, it wasn't his exact job, but he just did it because it needed to be done. And he did a lot of the video stuff, even though he was actually in sales as an overlay on our security solutions. Myself and Aubrey are the other evangelists. And so we're just continuing to develop the DevCentral community. We have a community platform that we have just upgraded from a previous platform. We had another platform that a lot of people, if you've been on DevCentral in the last couple of years, you would have complained about the platform that we had migrated to because it ended up slowing down the site. And so we moved on to a proper platform, first in class, and it's back to being super fast. Everything's searchable on Google and whatnot. So we're just there to grow that community. We're also there to help the community broadly, though. We don't have to always talk about F5 solutions. We have the fortune of F5 being connected to a lot of different technologies out there. And so as a result, I get to learn a lot of other different technologies. And some people might not have all that same knowledge. So I can actually share that knowledge with everybody else as well, even though it's not part of F5 proper. Like I built an Intel NUC ESX server. And so I documented that, made a video about it, and people seem to like that. Nothing to do with F5. I mean, F5 paid for my Intel NUC, but yeah, it's content, and there's lots of people who are building Intel NUCs for learning. I want to get into that, actually, helping kind of the next generation of technologists get up to speed on stuff. And so yeah, we're just doing that, building out content, trying to engage the community. Once they get on the platform, then I have other teammates who actually really focus on the engagement with our customers or with our users on there as well. But we're all about just kind of building that. We're not there to sell anything. We don't have a quota or anything like that. We're just there to work on community, which seems to be a theme these days with SaaS companies, is that you have your DevRel or your developer advocates who are just out there to serve everybody else. If it happens that, hey, you like, you're talking to or you see a Kelsey Hightower and he's building out a solution and you see it's running on GKE, if you want to be like Kelsey Hightower, you're going to run your apps on GKE as well. Maybe that, that same kind of thing happens with other folks as well.
So if you're like Buu, you like him, do you go out and buy yourself an F5, a big IP just for your house? No, I'm just kidding. For your company. You're like, yeah, you know what? I really like what he's doing here. I think we need to get one of those. I love this content.
Yeah, my office isn't hot enough, so let's just run some big IPs in here.
Oh, I actually remember having the server racks here in my office with some HPs running at a high speed, and when they turned on, it sounded like a jet. Oh, yeah. I'll tell you what, you didn't need heat down in the basement at all.
Yeah, that's what I love about the Intel NUCs, though. I don't know if you run that in your home lab at all, but I had two 2U servers, and I have this Intel NUC now that it's got 64 gigs of RAM in there, yeah, and a terabyte, I think a terabyte that I put into there of SSD. And I just, I was slowly dwindling down the workloads that I was running at home anyways, but I moved it all onto Intel NUC, and it's silent. It's amazing.
Nice. So, Buu, how does one join DevCentral or get a hold of you? What are some places that they can reach you?
Yeah, first of all, the community is on community.f5.com. We organize everything. That's like the central hub for everything on there. But then otherwise, DevCentral has handles on all of the things. YouTube is where we deposit most of our videos and kind of grow our live streams from there. But you can also find us on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And even on Facebook as well. The engagement is a little bit different on there. There's actually a Reddit for F5 as well, if people want to go on there. That's more for technical folks. I mean, all of it is for technical folks, but I see a lot of people asking technical questions on Reddit. We try to hint to them, hey, there's actually a ton of people over on community.f5.com, but that's okay. You can ask on Reddit. And then personally, there's not a lot of other Buu Lams out there that are doing the same thing as me. So if you just Google me, you'll find me on LinkedIn is one of the primary spots, and Twitter is the primary spot to interact with me as well.
Nice. Where are you going to be next? What's the next event you're going to be at?
I don't know. I think, conference season has kind of passed through at this point. There's a couple other smaller ones that we may or may not end up at, but nothing on the books right now. So we'll see. I got a lot of other stuff that I do have to produce in the meantime. And so I'm looking forward to this time at home to just kind of crunch through all of that and get a bunch of other stuff out.
Well, I suggest everybody follow you on LinkedIn. Go ahead and check out the YouTube channel. Also on Twitter, you'll know what's happening next. Buu, I got one last question for you. Where can we get the shirt?
This shirt can be found on the Nginx Swag store. So This little guy here is a cat. I don't know if that can come out on camera,
Yep.
but I just found out that this cat is called Jinx, and this is actually an NGINX branded shirt.
Oh
So
yeah.
NGINX Swag store. They got really cool shirts on there. Like if folks follow me on LinkedIn, they'll see me posting with my "This is my favorite conference" shirt, which is
I
actually
saw
my
that
favorite
right when you
conference
went to
shirt.
BlackHat, right? You had it
Yeah.
you had it on the plane or whatever. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I wear that when I'm traveling, and then I go to cut. I'm in Canada, so I go through customs, and they're like, "What are you coming into the U.S. for?" I'm like, "Can't you see?"
That's more one of those, here's your
Yeah,
sign, literally.
yeah.
Oh, pretty good. Well, I got to put a link in the description below for any time you want those shirts. I might have to grab one myself. Boo, thank you so much for joining me. This has been awesome.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you on. Hopefully, we can collaborate more.
Uh,
Or sorry,
dude,
pleasure for me to be on here.
it's, you know what? Actually, is this your podcast or mine? No, this is pretty cool. Thank you for joining. I love having you on. We got to do more of these.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Buu Lam, community evangelist for DevCentral at F5. This has been the John Myer podcast. I'm your host, John Myer. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify, because guess what? We're out of here.